Good morning. Welcome back to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes for Monday, August 21st, 2023. And this morning I'm just going to be talking about what I've been doing over the last couple of days and then diving into some other topics perhaps. We'll see how it goes. My activities over the last couple of days has been dictated by the weather. I wake up in the morning and I look out the window. I see blue skies, I can go somewhere. I don't see blue skies, then I generally don't go anywhere. I can't remember how long it's been since my last behind the scenes and what I've done since then. It may go all the way back to this day when I decided to do a morning loop on my scooter. I noticed that the river that comes into Padang actually splits a couple of times, in fact. So it's one river. I don't know the name of the river. The main river comes down out of the mountains, enters city limits, and then there's a Y. You know, it splits into two channels, and this channel goes all the way over to Padang Beach, and then the other channel, which I think of as the main channel, though it does seem to be smaller, but it is the main channel, and it curves and winds and heads into Old Padang here. And this is where all the fishing boats are and all the boats that go out to Mentawai. So that is the main channel here. And then the other channel is more of it goes in a straight line according to Google Maps. So what I wanted to do, because I'd already walked up and down the the main channel a few times, and I've ridden my scooter up and down it many times, exploring the whole area, but I hadn't seen anything about the other channel. So I decided that morning just to ride my scooter to Padang Beach. That's the place where I got the flat tire before. And then when I was there, working on the flat tire and hanging out at the beach, that's when I noticed the other river. And there was a road following the side of the river, so I wanted to get on my scooter and ride along that other channel and follow it all the way until it meets up with the other channel, and then change and follow this river down. So basically I wanted to do a loop starting here at my hostel, following this channel of the river till it meets the other one, and then back here. So just basically cycle along the river, and I did do that, and I shot video along the way. I don't remember any particular small adventures. It was just a beautiful ride. I had the GoPro pointing in different directions, either angled towards the river, so you just sort of see the river as I ride along it. The biggest challenge, as always, was the traffic. And with the other channel, there were a few places where the river road, a very tiny road, meets up with a big road with a big bridge, and the mini road that I was on would just dead end. There was no way to get it, like they wouldn't go underneath the bridge or anything like that. So then I had to climb up out of there onto the main road, massive amounts of traffic, and then somehow find a way to go this way on that road, do a U-turn, come back this way, go into the local neighborhood, the tiny roads, and slowly work my way back to the river again. And then I could follow the river until I got to the next major road, and then I have to do it all over again. On this side, on the main channel, a lot of the places where the river path, the road is almost like a path that follows the river. It's really beautiful, really fun to ride along, where it meets up with the main roads where more of the traffic flows. It would often go like right underneath the bridge, or there'd be a very easy little way to cross over and continue on the other side. So you could follow this river pretty easily without having to fight with the traffic too much. But on the other side, I did find myself fighting with traffic quite a bit. And but it's still, really nice, really enjoyable. I stopped for a glass of iced tea at one point, and I think that's about all I did the entire time. So it really was just a quick little scooter ride that day. Then I think the rains came in the afternoon, so I wasn't able to do anything else. Another day was also a pretty rainy day, bad weather, but a friend of mine happened to be in town, Adi, And he's a member of the family that owns the house in the village where I've been storing my bicycle and where I've been staying from time to time. And Adi, he splits his time between his work in Pekanbaru and his work here in Padang, because his company has offices in both places. He manages sales teams for a big fertilizer company. So he comes into town, into Padang all the time, and then he works with his team of salespeople here and deals with whatever it is he has to deal with, and then he goes back to Pekanbaru. And he just happened to be here for a few days, and he reached out, and we arranged to meet one night for a cup of coffee, a snack or something. And when I first contacted him, I was trying to steer him towards meeting up during the day. Like I think most people are evening people, they're night people, and they kind of work during the day and then they meet up with friends at night. But me, at night, I'm done for the day. I'm always so tired for whatever reason. I guess I wake up really early, I go to bed really early. That's just the rhythm of my day. So nighttime, I'm pretty useless. And I tried to steer Adi towards us meeting in the morning on Sunday or in like noon. And I was picking out these places around Padang that I'd wanted to visit. Like there was a very fancy cafe with a beautiful viewpoint called Lighthouse Padang. And I've wanted to go there. I haven't had a chance yet. So I was kind of suggesting to Adi, like, hey, maybe Sunday, if you're interested in this kind of thing, we can meet up at Lighthouse Padang around, noon, when Planet Doug is awake. And he was sort of going along with me, but then it didn't work out. And then he suggested, well, what about tonight? So I was like, okay, it's like I fight back a little bit, this worldwide trend to meet up at night, but I have to give in sometimes. So we ended up meeting at around 19 because I checked with Adi and he'd never been there. He didn't know anything about it. And I thought it was a pretty cool place. I figured that if he lives in Padang quite often, it'd be nice to know about this place. Because the views of the river, the boat traffic, the scenery of the hills, all enclosed by glass. It's really a very interesting, very cool place. And I thought Adi would find that interesting. So I kind of said, well, why don't we meet there? And we did end up meeting there at about 7 at night. And he had been working all day, I guess, doing his manager things. And then he met me there at 7 at night. Though the whole thing didn't really work out, I suppose, in a way, because I was exhausted. I mean, I was so tired. By 7 o'clock, I was tired. My day was over, but his evening was just beginning. He was full of energy, but I was not. And I guess as a local person, he sees the world differently than I do. So I was expecting him to react to around 19, like to walk in and go, wow, what a cool place. I didn't know this was here. And I thought he would go to the railing and look at the river. And it was nighttime now, though, so there wasn't the same kind of daytime views, but there were, lights were up. You could see the river. There's a mosque across there. And I thought he'd go to the banister and look around. And man, yeah, this is kind of an interesting place. And, but he didn't react at all. Like, I don't think he even looked at anything. He came in, saw me, sat at the table. We picked a table and sat down, and then I don't think he looked around. He had no interest in the river. He had no interest in the scenery, no interest in the boats. I mean, this is all old to him. He was born and grew up in Sumatra. So he was like, river, fishing boats? Like what? So he had no interest in any of that. And then a band started playing, like kind of a small band, a guy on drums and an acoustic guitar and singing down in the courtyard. But the music was so loud that from that point on, I couldn't hear anything. Adi, as I told him, I find him to be very soft-spoken. It's difficult to hear his voice. I really have to lean in and I say, what? Excuse me? What did you, I have to get him to repeat himself all the time because I can't hear his voice. Maybe my hearing is going along with, the rest of this body as I get older and older. But yeah, I tried. Once the music started playing, I couldn't hear a word he was saying. And as Adi mentioned quite a few times, this is the one thing he noticed about around 19, is that he and I were by far the oldest people there. Like, there's a lot of people there. When I've been there during the daytime, it's been pretty much empty. But now it was evening, and there were couples coming in, and they were like sitting at all the tables. And of course, they were all young couples. And personally, I would never even notice. Like, no matter where I am, I don't notice how young or old people are, based, especially how it relates to me. Like, if I'm at a place like around 19, and everybody there is 30 years younger than me, I don't even notice, and it doesn't affect me. I don't feel like, oh, I don't belong here because I'm older than everyone else. It just never occurs to me, this sort of thinking. But Adi noticed it right away, and he mentioned several times, like, wow, there's a really young crowd here, isn't there? This is such a young crowd. Look how young everybody is. So I guess it wasn't his kind of place, because everybody was so young, and he felt out of place there. So the whole gathering perhaps didn't work out quite like how I thought it would. But it was nice to catch up with Adi. One of the more interesting things about him is his hobby is collecting and restoring Citroen cars. Citroen? I still don't know how to pronounce it. A French car, obviously. And they sold Citroens here in Indonesia for a decade or a decade and a half or a couple of decades. Then they stopped, but they used to sell these cars here, and they're really interesting cars. Adi showed me his two in his collection before that he had restored from rusted hulks. Like, there was nothing there at all, and he rebuilt the whole car. And I knew nothing about these cars, but they're really unusual in terms of their suspension and cooling systems and the dashboard design. They're very, very interesting cars. So that's his hobby. And he picked up a new one. He recently was on the island of Java, and I guess there's an online community of Citroen hobbyists, people who love these cars and study them and restore them and drive them, things like that. And through that community, he found out about another one, a 1990 model that was for sale. The two he has now are quite a bit older, I think from the 70s and the 80s, and now he added a 1990 model to his collection. And it sounds like this one is in better condition, so he doesn't have to do as much restoration work on it. But yeah, so it was fun to hear about everything that he's been up to. And he has a bunch of trips planned for his business, for his company. He's going to be going to Malaysia on a company trip. He's going to China on a company trip. So we had a lot to talk about anyway. So my coffee is ready, so I'll be right back. All right, I have my coffee. Coffee number 2 for this morning. Yeah, speaking of how young everybody was at this cafe, I really noticed it when we left. We left at about 9 o'clock, I guess. I think Adi was sort of willing to trying to get comfortable in the Planet Doug office here, i.e. my hostel bed. Yeah, I think Adi would have been more than willing to go from Arau 19 to another place, get something to eat, something to drink, and then another place, and then keep the party going, so to speak. But yeah, I couldn't do it. I was so tired. So yeah, we left at about 9 o'clock, and when we stepped out onto the street, I was kind of astonished because I've walked in this neighborhood of old Padang and Chinatown and the riverside many, many times. I'm out there all the time walking around and exploring. And it's always been largely empty. I mean, there's nobody there other than me and the fishermen and the Coast Guard, and that's about it. And school children. But 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, it was jammed. We stepped out onto the street, and this street, which I'd always seen as completely empty, there's my scooter parked outside around 19, and that's the only vehicle anywhere. But now, as far as I could see, it was nothing but scooters and cars parked everywhere. And looked like all the local cafes and everything were just packed with people. And of course, all young people. So the fact that everybody at around 19 was young is not really a surprise, because of course Indonesia's population is a very young population. That's just the way things are in these countries in Southeast Asia. You know, if you look at the curve, the population curve sort of thing, the bulge is all around, you know, the teens and the 20s and the 30s, because that's, you know, a large population of young people. Of course, if you look at the population graph for Canada, it's the opposite now, because we have, you know, fewer and fewer children, and then this, you know, generation has gotten older and older, so there's a much higher percentage of older people in a place like Canada. But Indonesia, very young country, very youthful country. So all up and down the riverside, all those cafes were just jammed with young people. Yeah, really, really happening. You know, a lot going on. And I realized once again how much I miss out on because I don't go out at night. I'm always out during the day, and I always comment that everything is closed. Everywhere I go, places seem like ghost towns. Cafes are closed, restaurants are closed, and then it turns out they all open at night, because that's when the local people go out. They're not out there in the hot sun during the day. So I miss out on that aspect to life here. Partially because I'm not a night person, partially because I'm traveling alone. So I don't have a group of people to go out with at night. Exploring on your own during the day, well, that's a thing that backpackers do. You know, you grab your camera, whether it's whether to take pictures or video, and you go out exploring by yourself. But then when it comes to nighttime, and you're talking about, you know, clubs and bars and coffee shops where friends get together, suddenly you're there all by yourself, and you know, you kind of need friends to go out with. And then when you're on your own, you don't really have that. Of course, I had Adi at that time, but yeah, I was just too tired. But yeah, funny thing is, talking about the young population, I was telling Adi a little bit about my adventures and how, you know, everywhere I go, if I stop to get a snack, all the school children come up to me. I get surrounded by crowds of school children, and how friendly people are and how eager they are to talk with me and practice their English and take selfies together. But mixed in with that, you do get this certain element of children who want to practice their English profanities, and then they see me as a foreigner, and I'll be there chatting with people, you know, oh, where are you from, and do you like Indonesia, do you like Indonesian food, what is your, you know, they ask me all the usual questions. And then scattered around me, I start hearing the boys like saying, you know, giving me an F you, you know, they're like nudging their friends and say, okay, listen to this, and they'll start cursing me and swearing at me from a distance, saying really horrible things, and then they'll flip me off, you know, they give me the finger all the time. And that's a pretty common thing. That happens a lot. I was recently watching other YouTube vloggers quite a bit, and there's this couple traveling through Vietnam, and they were talking about how friendly everyone was. They're riding motorcycles through the countryside, but then they did mention that, you know, the boys are often, you know, telling them to F off and giving them the finger and things like that. And they kind of laugh it off as, oh, they're just having fun. They don't really mean it, which is kind of the attitude you have to adopt. But I must admit, it does have an effect on me, and I do wish they didn't do it, and I wish they understood how it feels to be on the receiving end of that sort of thing. You know, maybe they're joking around, these kids, and they don't understand how serious it is from a Western point of view to give someone the finger. I mean, it's a call to war. I mean, it's a serious thing. But the kids here, they see it in TV shows, they see it on Western movies, and they think it's really funny, so they flip me off. And I was telling Adi a little bit of that story, and then we left from around 19, and then I was walking back to this hostel down this narrow market road that I usually follow back and forth. And during the day, it's pretty active, a lot of people around. But I did feel as I was walking down this alleyway. This time it's kind of a series of connected alleyways. I felt a little bit vulnerable because it was dark and it was kind of empty, and there were some real sketchy looking men hanging out here and there. And then there was an area where they got a bit more active, and then a group of 5 men. They were older men, like not old men, but they were in their late 20s or something, walking towards me. And then they kind of made eye contact, and then the guy kind of looked at me and said, hey, 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 you know, to get my attention. So he made me look at him, and then he just gave me the finger, you know, F you, and then gave me the finger right in my face, you know. It's like, whoa. It's like, I don't even know who you are. Never met you before in my life. I don't know where all this hostility is coming from, but it did stick with me, you know. It's like that moment has been replaying over and over in my mind. And I don't know if local people understand the effect it has. You know, I think it's human nature too. We do tend to focus on negative things. We give them more emotional and psychological weight than positive things. So you go out for the whole day, I do, you know, exploring on my scooter, walking around, and everyone is friendly, everyone is nice. And yet that man who cursed me and gave me the finger, you know, late at night with his group of friends, that's what really sticks in my brain. It's like, because it felt very threatening and very hostile, you know, and I remember that moment so clearly. And it really bothered me for a long time afterwards. But yeah, just something that happened, something I've been thinking about. And when I met with Addy, he suggested someplace where I could go. I don't think I can pronounce it properly. It is called Sitinjau Lawik. Sitinjau Lawik. And this was a place that I knew about because long ago, when I rode my scooter from the Bukittinggi area to Padang, I deliberately chose more of a roundabout route through some backcountry roads, or roads that I thought were remote backcountry roads, because it looked really beautiful. The road, it was like a mountain road, winding and curving, and I noticed on that road there were a couple of viewpoints, like panorama viewpoints, called Sitinjau Lawik 1 and Sitinjau Lawik 2. I chose that road because of those panoramas. But of course, the day that I rode to Padang was just, you know, thunderstorms and rain and heavy, heavy traffic. And I didn't see a thing. I mean, there were no views at all. The entire world was nothing but clouds and rain. And so I never did see any of that beautiful scenery. And then I had been thinking about one day riding my scooter just back up that mountain road, like not to go anywhere, but just to have the experience of riding it when the weather was good. And then when Addy suggested that place, it kind of reminded me, and I thought, oh, actually, you know, that would be a good plan for the next morning, which was, Sunday morning, yesterday. And then I made plans to do that. And then when I woke up in the morning, the weather looked okay. It looked pretty good. Saw some blue sky, and I thought, okay, let's do that. And I got ready, and I hopped on the scooter, and then I plotted a route following the river for as long as possible, and then finally meeting up with the main road, and then I was going to ride up to these panoramas. And it was a pretty good ride. I mean, going up and coming down was crazy. Steep. I had no idea how steep this road was because I'd only come down so far. Now I was going up for the first time, and man, it was steep. A lot of cyclists on the road, like hobbyist cyclists out to get exercise, you know, and they were just pumping those pedals going up. Had to admire those guys because the roads were steep. Scenery was really nice. As soon as I got out of the city, amazing scenery. Tons of trucks. Going up, not as much truck traffic as coming down. Coming down was the real truckorama on that highway. But even going up, tons of trucks. So I had to pass all kinds of slow-moving trucks. That was pretty wild, pretty crazy. You pass a bunch of, a lot of monkeys here and there, macaques who live at the side of the road, and people will throw snacks out the window, and then the monkeys gather there, to be fed. Really interesting scene. And one of the most interesting aspects to me is that the road has a lot of switchbacks, like very, very tight corners. And the way switchbacks work, when it turns like that, the road suddenly becomes extremely steep. Like the closer you go to the inside of the corner, the steeper it gets. And these trucks are massive, some of them. They're big, big trucks. So they take those corners really wide. And they have to do that for two reasons. They have to go wide because their trucks are so long. You know, if they try to do a tight turn, they're not going to make it. So they swing wide, but they also swing even wider because the wider you go, the more shallow the gradient becomes. So if they, you know, they could cut it a little bit tighter, but then they're hitting this point where the road goes straight up and their engine can't handle that. So they go really, really wide. And they're very dangerous corners because people coming down, of course, their instinct is to cut tight. Like when you're coming down, if you go really, really wide, that's actually more dangerous in a way because you've got that momentum sort of pushing you to the outside. And if you go super wide, you're covering more distance, moving faster, and I think you could lose control of your scooter and go right off the edge sort of thing. So rather than covering a long distance going wide, people coming down, their instinct is to cut the corner tightly. But the instinct of the truck drivers coming up is to go wide. So, do the math. Head-on collisions, right? You've got someone cutting it tight, someone going wide, and they meet in the middle, and you've got a head-on collision. So what happened over time is that local people, to make a little bit of money, will volunteer to direct traffic on those corners. So you get all these young guys who know about this in advance, and I think they pick busy days like Saturdays and Sundays when there's going to be more traffic, and then they stand on those corners and then they tell the trucks, when it's free to go around, and they warn people coming this way to, get out of the way, and they stand there and try to create like a human barrier between those coming down and those coming up. And then once in a while, one of the truck drivers in particular will lean out the window with some money as a donation to these guys, and they make, a salary for the day based on these donations. Funny thing is though, I saw these guys everywhere going up and coming down on almost every, tight corner. You'd see groups of these guys, but it was very rare for me to spot a moment when they were handed any money. So I kept thinking, boy, these guys are doing a lot of work, spending a lot of time, and they really can't be making much money. The entire day going up and down, I saw money change hands only once. I'm sure it happens a lot more than that, but I only witnessed it once. And in that case, it was kind of funny because it was a big truck, and the driver, wasn't the driver, it was the passenger, because he would have been on the right-hand side. This truck was going up. No, it was the driver. Yeah, it was the driver, because the driver is on the right-hand side. And then the driver leaned out the window with the money, but the truck was so big that the traffic director couldn't reach his hand, Maybe he was a short guy, I can't remember. But anyway, he had to jump up into the air to get the money, So it's a bit of an effort for the drivers to give money to these guys, even if they want to. So I am curious how much money they make, but whether they get money or not, they take their work pretty seriously. They're out there expending a lot of energy, directing traffic. And when I was coming down, I noticed it in particular because I had quite a few trucks coming straight for me. Like I'm cutting it really wide. Like I'm as far, the farthest left edge of the road that you can ride on. I'm doing a wide circle. I'm not in a hurry. I'm not riding fast. I'm looking at the scenery. So I've pegged my scooter at 30 or 40 kilometers an hour. That's as fast as I'm going. So I'm going, I'm not in a hurry, so I don't care. I'm not trying to cut the corner. I take a wide as I can possibly go. But even then, the trucks were coming straight for me in a head-on collision because they're riding in my lane on the extreme side as well. And then I would have to actually get off the road and go off onto the shoulder if there was a shoulder. Otherwise, I get totally demolished by one of these trucks. But these young guys were standing right there and giving you a visual warning that, okay, we're directing trucks here, and be careful as you come around this corner. So I saw a lot of it going on, but as I said, I didn't see much money change hands, which is kind of understandable because it's all you can do to ride your scooter safely or drive your car safely. It's how in the world are you going to do that and get money out and give it to these guys, right? But hopefully, I mean, they're providing a pretty good service, so hopefully they make enough money to make it worth their while. Something else that has been part of my life in Sumatra is I often miss things because signage isn't there. So I wanted to see these two panoramas, Panorama 1 and Panorama 2. I guess I missed them partially because I no longer have an internet connection. I no longer have mobile internet anymore because Indonesian customs cut off my phone again. So I can see Google Maps. I can navigate with Google Maps. It still works and GPS still works, so that's fine. But because I don't have a mobile connection anymore, I can't plot distance. So I can't stop and see how many kilometers it is to the lookout point, which is how I normally navigate. I look on Google Maps and it says, oh, it's 15 kilometers to the first panorama. And then I look at my odometer and I add 15 to my odometer and I can see, oh, when my odometer is at 678 kilometers, I'll be at the panorama. But I can't do that anymore because I no longer have mobile internet. So I ended up missing both of them. And the other reason I missed them is because there were no signs. I was, based on what I saw on Google Maps, I thought there'd be like a big area with signs saying Viewpoint, panorama this way, arrows. And I was kind of assuming I would see these places. There would be signs pointing the way. And then I rode and I rode and I rode and I rode, and I felt like I'd gone over the top of the mountain and I was on my way down the other side, and the road was like winding and winding and winding going down. I thought, this isn't right. I think I've gone too far. Just had a feeling like, okay, you've been driving a long time. I think I should have reached them by now. And then I pulled over to the side of the road and checked Google Maps, and yeah, I had blasted right past them. And I just went on. I was practically at the city of Solok. I think it's called Solok, is the next major town. And the panoramas was nowhere near Solok, and I was practically at the city. I had gone so far. And I thought, oh boy. So I had to turn around and go all the way back. And even going back, I had to check Google Maps over and over and over again to make sure I didn't miss this place. And then when I got to panorama number 2, it was obvious how I'd missed it because, yeah, there were no signs of any kind that I saw. There was nothing to indicate that there was any kind of an attraction there. And the road leading to it, if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't see it. It's just like local people know it's there, so they don't need signs. I need signs. But anyway, I found it this time because I was moving very carefully and I was stopping over and over again to check Google Maps, and I found it. And unfortunately, there was no view. By the time I got there, the clouds had moved in, and Padang, you're supposed to be able to see Padang city and the ocean down below, but I couldn't see anything. All I saw was clouds, which didn't bother me at all, to be honest, because it was the ride to get there that was a lot of fun. And then even the viewpoint was interesting because right below me was a curve in the road, like a little S-bend. And while I sat there, I got a cup of coffee and a couple of buns at one place, and then I got a bowl of noodles at another place. And while I was sitting there with my GoPros, I could watch all the traffic down below. I could see all these trucks, all these convoys going around this tight corner. The trucks coming down in, whatever gear they're in, the lowest possible gear that they have, with their air brakes, constantly hissing and letting go, down, 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 down. And you get 3 or 4 of these trucks in a row with a bus, And then, of course, you end up with 15 cars stuck behind them and a whole bunch of motorcycles, everybody jockeying, for an opportunity to pass. It's pretty fun to watch. And then when I rode down, wow, that was something else. I ran my GoPro on a time lapse for the whole way. I kind of made a mistake. I thought it would be interesting to have 2 time lapses, one with the GoPro facing me, because then you could see what was behind me, and another one on my chest harness pointing forward. And I had both of them set to a time lapse at the same speed. So I thought I could take those 2 videos, line them up, and then I could switch back and forth between them during, like in the video. You could see me as I'm passing, and then you suddenly get a view behind me. But it turns out the GoPro facing me at time lapse, it was just really weird because it's too close to me, it's too close to my face, too close to my body, and then you get me. I mean, the whole time that I'm riding, of course, I'm checking both mirrors all the time. I'm looking at this mirror, looking at that mirror, then I'm doing a shoulder check this way, a shoulder check that way, and I'm going around, mirror, 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 shoulder check, mirror, mirror. So in the time lapse, all you see, it's like, I don't know exactly how to describe it. You just look at my head, and all you see is back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, up, down, back and forth, shoulder check, just like this crazy head movement, and my eyes darting everywhere. It's just really weird and really distracting. So it didn't have that time-lapse effect. I should have had that camera pointing forward as well, or pointing to the side, or done something different with it, but rather than pointing backwards. But anyway, the video from the chest harness, I think, is kind of fun. It gets my hands and the handlebars, and you can see what's ahead of me, and sped up. It looks pretty crazy with me passing all these trucks, because this particular highway has a shoulder, and the local people have developed the habit of passing on the left, like passing trucks on the shoulder, as well as on the right, like actually going into the oncoming lane and passing. But if the oncoming lane is blocked and you can't pass that way, you just go onto the shoulder and you pass that way. So you're like zigging around this way, then around this way, then this way, then this way, then this way. And it's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun. And then in a time lapse, sped up like that, it looks crazy. It looks like a death-defying journey. But of course, it wasn't nearly as dangerous as it looks in the video, because I'm going a lot slower than it looks, in the time lapse. But still, it's pretty crazy riding, and a lot of fun, assuming you're relatively, confident on your scooter or on your motorcycle. I wouldn't want to drive that road in a car. I really wouldn't. I don't think that would be any fun. But on a scooter, yeah, tons of fun, absolutely. And then I followed this all the way into Padang, and for me, that was the end of my day. That was going to be my adventure. My Planet Doug video was going to be riding up to the viewpoint and then coming back down again. But by the time I got to Padang, it was still relatively early in the day, and the sun had come out. So now it was like perfectly gorgeous blue skies. That's when I should have been up at the viewpoint, but hey, my timing wasn't the best for that. And then I made a snap decision. Instead of going back to the hostel, I decided just to keep riding, keep the time lapse running, and I was going to ride all the way out the southern end of Padang, go down the coast to this cafe that I mentioned to Adi, the Lighthouse Padang. I'd said to Adi originally, like, maybe we can meet at the Lighthouse noon on Sunday. That's when it opens at noon. And I thought, the beautiful viewpoint, nice cafe, that'd be a nice place to meet. But we met at night instead. And then I decided, why don't I just follow through on that plan? Beautiful sunny skies. And then I rode my scooter all the way along the coast and up the hills, curving, winding roads, all the way to Lighthouse Padang. And then I had lunch and a drink there. I'm gonna drink some of my coffee, and then I'll tell that story. So the famous Lighthouse Padang. I say it's famous because it's known locally as kind of a high-end sort of cafe with beautiful views. You know, it's a fancy place. It's a well-known attraction. But just like the lookout points, there's like almost no signs. There's no signage. Like I guess I'm kind of used to tourism in the West, like in Canada. It can actually be pretty crazy. Like if you're riding on one of Canada's national highways, and there's a McDonald's 500 miles ahead of you, you know, they'll start showing you signs right then and there. You know, McDonald's in 500 miles, and then it's like 450 miles. You know, they give you sign after sign. I mean, they really want your business. And I'm exaggerating, of course. You're not going to get a sign 500 miles away. But by the time you get to the rest point, the lookout point, the McDonald's, you've seen 25 signs before you get there telling you, okay, now it's 2 miles away. Now, well, in Canada, 2 kilometers away. Now a kilometer away. Now 500 meters away. Now, you know, they really point you to that place. And then here in Indonesia, there's like no signs at all. So I'm constantly going right past places that I'm looking for. And I did the same thing with Padang Lighthouse. In fact, I did it before as well, because I had my eye on this place. Before, I was chatting with Daryl from Wander Eats. He picked it out on Google Maps and says, oh, you should check this place out. It looks really, really nice. So I had it on my mind as a place to check out. And I rode down that highway a couple of times already. And each time I thought, okay, let's look for this lighthouse thing. And then each time I never saw it. I rode the whole thing, rode all the way back. I got back here. Never saw Lighthouse Padang. I just rode right by it. Never saw it. I went down there a second time. I was determined to find it this time. Never saw it. This time, I was deliberately going there, and I was going to stop there, and I still rode right past it. Just blew right past it. And the road at that point, you're going up and up this coastal peninsula, like this hill, and Lighthouse Padang is right at the top of it. And then when you go over the top, now you're going down the other side. And I could feel it. Okay, I've reached the top, I'm going down. So the lighthouse must have been there. I must have gone past it again. But there was really no safe place to turn around, because this road is really busy, really dangerous. And it's just curving and curving and curving and winding and very narrow. There's really, I mean, if you stop there to do a U-turn, you're going to be taken by surprise. You know, you're sitting there at the side of the road and you're waiting for a break in the traffic, and then you're going to do a quick U-turn, but someone's going to come racing around the corner on either side of you, because they're really tight curves. So I ended up, rode all the way to the top, missed Lighthouse, and then I go over the hill, and then I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. I went all the way down to sea level on the other side, and then I reached a small town with a fishing harbor. Well, I've been there before. And there I knew the road would straighten out and widen. And there I could safely make a U-turn. And then I had to go all the way back up again. And in both directions, I was stuck behind gridlock with these giant trucks, because you get a big truck. And if you happen to get another big truck and then a bus all lined up, this road is quite tight. And it's very, very hard to pass. So basically, I couldn't go at the speed. Even my normal slow speed was too fast, because I'd run into the back of one of these convoys, and there's just no way to get around it. So I just throttled way back, and I was going at like 20 kilometers per hour, because I just stopped at the side of the road, and I waited for that convoy to get far ahead of me, because I don't want to be breathing their exhaust the entire time and just looking at the back of this huge bus. So I just let them get way ahead of me, and then I pulled out into traffic, and I just went at 20 kilometers an hour, because I didn't want to catch up with them. So I just maintained my distance, and I let everybody pass me, and I just went up. And this time I checked Google Maps really, really carefully. Again, I couldn't check distance, which is one of the reasons I went right past it again. And this time at the last second I spotted it. And then I understood why I missed it, because it's hidden, for one thing. You don't really see it. And then they have a big parking area, but they've covered the entire parking lot with sheets of galvanized steel. It's like a long section of just galvanized steel fencing. I mean, it's all rusted and old and kind of broken down. And you would think there must be some kind of a junkyard or a shipping yard or something on the other side, garbage dump. It had that kind of look to it. And again, there's no sign. There's no sign that says, you know, Lighthouse Padang, here. And then at the last second, I went right by the entrance. I guess there was a gap in this galvanized tin. Now, at the corner of my eye, I saw something, I think, that said Masuk, which is, you know, entrance. And I said, oh! And then way down at the other end of this galvanized steel, there was another gap. And I think it said exit. Keliwagar means exit, I think. And I spotted it at the last second. And then, I slowed down, hit the signal, turn signal. So I basically went into the parking lot through the exit, but I caught it at the last minute. And even then, I wasn't sure I was in the right place. I'm just sort of looking around, like is this Lighthouse? Couldn't tell. And if I'd missed that exit gap, I would have been going all the way down the other side again before I could find a place where I could safely turn around. And I'd be going, to this day, I'd be like a ping pong ball going, you know, boom, you know, back and forth, trying to find Lighthouse Padang. But I finally found it. And then, yeah, my experience there was kind of interesting. All kinds of surprises and small adventures. Some my fault, some the style of Lighthouse Padang, where I was running a time lapse while I was doing this whole journey. And I wanted to end the time lapse with a view of the ocean. So I rode in on my scooter, parked it, and then what I wanted to do was unhook the GoPro and then just sort of slowly lift it up off the scooter and then walk towards the edge and then have the time lapse capture the view of the ocean with the hills and the ships on the water down below. And then with the time lapse, what I like to do is occasionally get almost like a still photograph, because like a time warp time lapse is when you're moving and it's a time lapse. So if you want to actually stop and look at a scene, you have to hold the camera in place for a few seconds. So what I do is a walk to the edge and then hold the camera there for like 10 seconds. I do a 10 count, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can turn off the time lapse, and then you get a nice view of the ocean. You can't, it's not like taking normal video. You can't just sort of point it towards the ocean and then turn it off, because in a time lapse, you're not going to get anything. It's going to go by way too fast. So anyway, I parked the scooter, lifted off the camera, and then I went over to the edge and I shot the time lapse. Okay, fine. And then, I'll talk about the details of this later, and then I went into the restaurant. I'm walking all around, I'm taking video, I'm thinking about what table. I explored the whole area. I'm pointing my camera in this direction. Beautiful view of the Teluk Bayur shipping harbor, beaches down below, mountains, ocean, islands. I'm filming, and I see a path that goes down below, and I go down there. I'm taking more video. I'm talking about the experience on the GoPro. Meanwhile, the table attendants, the servers there, are constantly trying to get me to sit down at a table. So somehow me wandering around is really bothering them. And the guy would come up to me, he's like, "Oh, what table would you like, sir? What table?" And I was like, "Well, just give me a minute. I'm going to film a little bit, and then I'll go sit down." And then a few minutes later, it's like, sir, what table would you like?" And it's like, calm down. I want to take a little video. So this whole thing went on for quite a while. And then I'm standing there taking video, and then I sort of stopped because something didn't feel right. It's like there's something unusual. Like, what is it? There's something missing. And I often have that feeling if I'm walking around now and I don't take a GoPro. I have this weird feeling like, oh, what's wrong? And then I realize, oh, you're not actually holding a camera. I'm so used to holding a camera now. When I'm not, it feels foreign to me. It's like, feels like something is wrong. But in this case, I was holding the camera. It's like, well, that's not it. What is it? There's something different. And I realized what it was. I was feeling comfortable. No knapsack. I wasn't wearing my knapsack. And I thought, oh man, like, whoa, because my knapsack has all my camera gear in it, and it had my passport in it. And where is it? Did I put it down because I was taking video? Did I put it down to change the battery and then I just left it and I walked away? And I was like, where could it be? My brain is racing, thinking back over time, like, who knows, maybe I left it, way before I even got to Lighthouse Padang. I couldn't, and then I remembered, oh, it's probably still on my scooter, because I don't wear the knapsack when I'm on the scooter. I put it on the floor, like on the platform in between my feet. And normally that is not a problem at all. I get off the scooter. It's like, it's muscle memory. You get off the scooter and you turn off the ignition, you pull out the key, you remove the GoPro, grab the knapsack, and you go. But this time I was so focused on continuing the time lapse that I skipped the pick up the knapsack part, right? I turned off the scooter, pulled the key out of the ignition, you lock the handlebars doing that, you remove the GoPro, and this time I wanted to keep the time lapse going, so then I just got up and I kept filming, and I skipped the step where I grabbed my knapsack, and then I just walked away and I left it behind. So for a brief moment I was mildly panic-stricken, and then I had to go through the amusing process of leaving the restaurant and racing back out to the parking area, which was quite crowded. It was like jammed with scooters and motorcycles. And then to go see is my knapsack still there? And to my relief, yes, it was still there. No one had spotted it. At least no thief had spotted it. Perhaps normal, nice people had seen it and then just left it there, because you do see a lot of scooters and motorcycles with bags still on them. I mean, you wouldn't often see, a bag like mine still on the scooter with so many valuable things inside it. People will go to the market and buy a bunch of stuff, and then they just leave all the bags on their scooter, things like that. So it's not unusual to see bags still sitting on a motorcycle or scooter. But one like mine, yeah, not that often. So, it was still there. And I say it was amusing to leave the restaurant and go back out, because I felt like I had to explain myself to all the staff. It is because of the unusual system that they have there at the Lighthouse. Like when I parked my scooter and finished the time lapse, and then I'm walking towards the Lighthouse, I still didn't know that whether or not it was the Lighthouse. I still hadn't seen a sign anywhere, but there was a booth, and there were some, official looking people behind this booth, and they had some papers and things in front of them. They appeared to be official, like checking people in or something, and I wasn't sure what the system was here. Like, if this is the Lighthouse Padang, can I just go, or do I have to do something here? I don't know. Like, that's the situation you're in as a foreigner. All the local people, they just know everything. I mean, they're just born with all this knowledge, and we don't know, we dumb foreigners. So we end up in these weird situations where I'm asking questions of local people, and they don't even know what I'm asking, because, like, why would you not know that? But it turns out that Lighthouse Padang has a voucher system. Basically, before you're allowed to even go into it, you have to go to this booth and give them money, and then they give you a voucher worth food and drinks. So you basically go into the restaurant having paid in advance, and that's a way for them to force people to spend a minimum amount of money. And when I was looking at some of the reviews on Google Maps, if you click on only the 1-star reviews, like if you read all the negative reviews, like only the negative ones, 90% of them are complaining about the voucher system. That really makes people think badly of the place. And I guess in the past, it was 100,000 rupiah. That was the minimum. So you give 100,000 at the booth, they give you a voucher for 100,000, and then when you sit down at the table and then the server comes to your table, you give them your voucher. This is also something I didn't know. and then that amount gets applied to your bill. So basically, you have to spend 100,000 rupiah. If you don't spend it, they don't give you your money back. I mean, you could order food to go, like up to 100,000, but of course, everybody ends up spending more than 100,000 because you can't exactly hit it, dead on. So it used to be 100,000. So even if like 2 people show up, a couple, they have to pay 200,000 rupiah just to get in, and that guarantees they will spend at least 200,000 rupiah while they're there. But they seem to have changed it, because when I went up to the desk, again, I'm asking my dumb foreigner questions. Like, I'm like, can I just, because I didn't really know about this system. It's like, can I just go in? Can I go? Is this Lighthouse? Can I go? Or do I have to do something here? I didn't want to just walk by these people and have them come running after me, sir, come back, come back. But anyway, we worked through all this confusion, and they explained to me, I eventually understood that I had to buy this voucher, but it was only for 50,000 rupiah. And the first thing I thought was, well, okay, fine, because I knew a place like this, you're going to spend 50,000 anyway. I mean, you can order a drink, like an iced coffee, it's going to cost you almost 50,000 rupiah anyway. So it's not like you could go in there and get away with spending less than 50,000. But I guess the voucher system, if I'm guessing, it's designed so that people can't just go in, hang out, with their own food and drinks, take a bunch of pictures, like take advantage of the beautiful setting, and then leave without buying anything. So this forces at least everyone who goes in is going to spend at least 50,000 rupiah. So from that point of view, yeah, I get it. It kind of makes sense. But I did, as I walked toward, after I went through this system and I saw some other things, as I was walking towards the restaurant, I did comment on videos like, man, this place takes itself pretty seriously. It thinks it's pretty amazing, and has a lot of rules for people who show up here. And I meant that in a negative way, because yeah, the voucher system, who wants to deal with that nonsense? And it got more and more confusing, because I eventually sat down at a table, and then to the utter relief of the servers, man, they just couldn't stand it that I was walking around without sitting down. This really bothered them. But they eventually got me to sit down at a table, and then a server came up and he gave me the menu, and then I'm ordering, and then he kept saying something to me in English, or combination English Indonesian. He was asking me something, and I had no idea what he was saying. Like, I was trying to think of the context. What could he possibly be saying to me? And I couldn't come up with anything. And eventually he pulled out his phone, and then he was doing a lot of typing on Google Translate, and he finally handed his phone to me, and I couldn't read it. The sun was so bright out there. I'm like, I've got my reading glasses on. I'm like tilting his phone. His phone was quite an old one, and the screen was really, really dim, burned in, I guess, over time. And it's like, what the, I finally went into the shade, like under a tree, and I'm cupping with my hand, and I'm like, oh, voucher. That he had written voucher. It's like he needs me to give him the voucher now. I assumed you have your meal, and then when you go to pay, you hand in your voucher, and they take 50,000 off your bill because you've already paid 50,000. I just assumed that's how the system worked. But no, you have to hand it to your server when they take your order, and then they give it to the cashier, and it goes into your bill, right from the get-go. So anyway, he was saying voucher, and I finally went, oh, voucher, voucher, voucher. So of course I'd put it away in my wallet, so now I'm taking out my wallet, and oh, okay, here's my voucher. And they have quite an automated system, I guess. He had to know my name, and oddly enough, my name Douglas made sense to him. It was like, Douglas, and he said, okay. He's like, what? You know what that is, and you know how to write it down and spell it, and then when my food came, I ordered fish and chips. Came on a black ceramic plate, kind of fancy looking plate, and it had a little sticker on it, a little peel and stick sticker that said Douglas on it, and I think table B12, because I was sitting at table B12. And then I think what happens is, like, that guy, my server, he never came back. Like, he put in my order, and then it goes into some kind of an automated system, and then just goes to the kitchen, and then it gets prepared, and they look, oh, B12 table, and someone else brings it to the table. So you're not dealing with the same server the whole time. It's like an automated system. And I've seen in the negative reviews on Google, people were also complaining about how long it took to get their orders. Like, and they have a 2-hour time limit. So by the time you get there, you can only stay for 2 hours before they kick you out. And then people were complaining. He says, well, yeah, you gave us 2 hours, but it took you an hour and a half for us to even get our food. You know, because this place gets very, very busy, you know, at sunset times, things like that. I was there at like 1 in the afternoon, so there were a lot of people there, but it wasn't crowded or anything, so it was fine for me. And even on the table, they have a little placard that says, you know, table B12, and they have written down in English, please be patient while waiting for your order to be served. You know, like, they've gotten so much feedback about it taking too long to get the food that they've actually printed it out, a little message, and they put it on every table, like, you know, just pleading for patience in advance, you know. So I was looking at that thinking, well, that's not a good sign, you know. But of course I was there midday, you know, not very crowded, so my order came very quickly. And yeah, I was, you know, the menu to me didn't seem extraordinary. You know, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, like, wow, you got to check out all the food at this place. It was pretty standard stuff, heavy on the Western side, like spaghetti carbonara, spaghetti Alfredo, I think, pizza. The pizza looked good, but it also looked expensive on the menu. And then chicken teriyaki, so like not fancy Indonesian dishes or anything like that. A lot of finger food, you know, some cheesy things and dips. And then so from that selection, I thought, let's go for something different. It's like, when was the last time I had fish and chips? Couldn't tell you. It's not something I order as a rule, so it could be decades ago the last time I had fish and chips. You know, it was like Western style fish and chips. So that's what I ordered, and it was okay. The chips are okay. Came with a big dollop of mayonnaise, and the fish was battered fish. Yeah, it was fine. And I ordered some sort of a yogurt, banana shake, and a bottle of water. I guess I'm focusing on the negative. The positive, I should say something, is the view. Spectacular view. Like a beautiful spot up on the hill, looking over the ocean, the ships, the shoreline, the harbor. Really, really nice. And they've done a really nice job with the decor. Had almost a, I want to say, Mexican, like Southern California look to it, with whitewashed, curved rocks. Everything was like whitewashed, like everything was white. And the seating was nice. They had a variety of seating. When I was there, it was really windy, though. That was a problem. I was sitting outside, and you couldn't put anything down on the table. You just blew away because it gets pretty windy up there. But that's not their fault. They can't control the wind. And with the sun, midday, it could get really hot. So you have to pick your table wisely, one that's in the shade as much as possible. But yeah, I mean, the main attraction to this place is the gorgeous view. And everybody was going around, you know, taking pictures with their smartphones, and all the women were posing. They have these plants there with the fuzzy tips on them, and then I guess it's a classic thing for women to do, where they hold on to the plant, you know, for some reason, and then the men are like taking pictures of their wives and their girlfriends, and everybody's posing all over the place. And the other thing I noticed, I didn't mention yet, is at the booth when you come in, there's a big sign that says, no professional cameras allowed. And I'm walking up there, you know, I'm bristling with cameras, you know, I'm talking into a GoPro, and I got a GoPro here, and I'm thinking, what does that mean, no professional cameras? You know, am I going to be allowed to take my GoPro in? I wasn't sure. But when reading, again, the reviews on Google Maps, what they mean by professional is a big, good, expensive-looking camera. Like, I assumed that sign meant like for commercial photography, if you want to come here and do a wedding shoot or a commercial for a product or publication in a magazine and you come in with big cameras, that you're not allowed to do. You have to get permission to do that. That's what I assumed, but it turns out the way the rule is applied, it just means you can bring in a smartphone and maybe a point and shoot and a GoPro, but if you have a mirrorless camera or digital, digital SLR, like an actual big camera, you're not allowed to bring those in. So yeah, that's what they mean by professional. They just mean a good camera, like a full frame or APS-C or even Micro Four Thirds. So if I was there with my Olympus that I'm filming with right now, they wouldn't let me bring that camera in because it looks professional, I guess. It looks expensive. And that's, so people were complaining about that too. But that's when I said, yeah, these guys take themselves pretty seriously, And the food, as I said, was fine. It was good. I'm not going to rave about it to anyone. But I did find the presentation a little bit odd because when the guy took my order, I asked for a bottle of water. I'm fighting dehydration. I'm trying to be conscious of drinking more water during the day. So I always try to order a bottle of water now, but I need it to be cold. And I knew it was going to come out, lukewarm. That's just the way things are in Indonesia. They don't, as a rule, drink cold water, it seems. So I asked for ice. Like, can I get water, like a bottle of mineral water they had on the menu, but can I also get ice with it? And he had to think about it for a second. It's like, okay, yeah, I think we can do that. He came out with a tiny paper cup. It's like one of those small paper cups you might get in a hospital dispenser sort of thing, like there's a water machine. You pull out a little paper cup and you get like half a swallow of water and you got to keep filling it up over and over. He brings one of those out filled with ice and it's like, oh, there's your ice, sir. Like, okay, that's pretty funny. Like for a fancy restaurant, I think if you're ordering water, you just assume it comes in a tall glass already filled with ice, right? And a straw. You figure that's how the water is going to be served. But here, they didn't even have a system for that. They just bring you a bottle. Here's your lukewarm tap water. And then when I asked for ice, they did it, but they had to get, I don't know where they found it, this little paper cup. By the time you're finished your lunch, that paper cup has gotten soggy, because the water soaks into it and the whole thing is flopping over and I'm trying to drink it. Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. And then my banana shake as well. At a fancy place like this with minimum orders and vouchers, you sort of expect it to come in a nice glass, but the banana shake came in a plastic cup, with a plastic lid and a straw, just like you would get at any roadside stand. So from that point of view, I think the presentation was a bit weird when it came to the drinks. The plate itself, the big black heavy clay thing, that was kind of nice. That suited the environment. And then the cutlery came in an envelope, which is kind of weird. It was like a brown manila envelope that had been sealed. Like someone, I don't know if they licked it or what they did, but there's like this brown package and I picked that up and I thought, well, surely they didn't seal it, did they? But then I had to unfold this envelope and then the lip of it was actually sealed. And I was thinking, yeah, that's kind of odd. Like someone in there, to put like licking the envelope and sealing it. But anyway, I had to tear it open to get out my cutlery. So a lot of funny things about this restaurant. And it got even funnier because I got up to leave before the 2 hours was up. I went to the cash register. As you leave, you don't get a bill brought to your table, you go to the cashier. So I did that, and then I went up to the, everybody's all excited when I came up, boule, boule, nervous about serving me. And I said in English, table B12. And they knew who I was. Like they didn't even need that information. They just kind of looked, oh, this is the dude, this is the boule, this is Douglas. And she went onto the cash register and pulled out a receipt and then slid it across the table. And her hand was, I don't think this was done on purpose, but thinking back, I don't know, it was a bit weird because her hand was covering the whole receipt and then she pointed at the bottom where it said 57,000. So they take my order, subtract 50,000 from the voucher, and the remaining was 57,000. And I wasn't thinking very clearly. I wasn't doing the math in my head or anything. So, oh, 57,000. I gave her the money, and then she gave me my change, and then I left. But as I was walking back to my scooter, I was thinking, it's like, oh, that was actually a bit more than I expected, because with the 50, now it's a total of 107,000. And my order should have come to 70 or 80,000. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. There must be taxes or something on top of that. I wasn't worried about it, but I was curious at the amount, because how did they list the voucher? How did all this work? So when I got back to my scooter, I looked at my receipt, and it was for the wrong order. It wasn't my table. It was for a table of 3 people. Because the first thing I saw was 3 bottles of water, and I thought, I didn't have 3 bottles of water. And then there was there was all these things that I hadn't ordered, and I thought, oh, they punched out the wrong table order. And then I was in that situation I often find myself in, of wondering what to do. Like, I had paid more than I owed. I had overpaid, but we're talking about $1 or $2. So I didn't care about the money. The fact that I had been overcharged because of their mistake didn't bother me in the slightest. I'm more than happy to just leave. But what happens to the other people? Like, the people that belong to this order, like, they're going to come and then they're going to say, oh, table B6 or whatever it was. And there's like, oh, you've already paid. And then they're going to figure out that they got the orders mixed up, and that could cause confusion. But at the same time, if I turn around and go back to the cashier and say, oh, you charged me too much, this is the wrong order, and now I have to give them the change that they gave me, but I don't know how much. I just stuffed the money in my wallet and then coins in my pocket and moved on with my life. It's like, I don't want to deal with all this where now they have to reverse everything. I'm going to be there for 20 minutes and I'm going to cause problems for them now, as they're going to try and figure out what happened and how do we, okay, you give me the change back, I give you your money back. Now it was just going to be a huge hassle. So quite often, like when I buy things at a local shop or something like that, I'll often get not enough change or too much change. Like the money gets wrong, they make a mistake quite often. And then I just let it go. Like, I can't be bothered. It's like, oh, you didn't give me enough change, or oh, you gave me too much change. I figure it all evens out in the end, because it's too much trouble to go back and try and figure out what went wrong and work through So in this case, I got back on my scooter and I was putting on my helmet and I'm ready to go, and I look at the receipt and it's like, oh, that's the wrong receipt. They gave me the wrong order. At that point, I had to make a decision about whether to go back in or not, and I thought, they'll figure it out, and I just left. So that was pretty funny. Hopefully, it didn't cause too much trouble for the next people who left. But yeah, the whole thing was quite amusing. Luckily, I mean, the main reason I didn't notice at first was because the final bill that I had to pay of 57,000 was sort of in the ballpark. It was like kind of okay. I did have a feeling like it was a little bit more than it should be, but at the same time, it was like, I think it's somewhere in the ballpark. What do I know? I don't even know how much the water was or how much the banana shake was. It was probably more expensive than I thought, so no big deal. But it turns out that this table was for 3 people, so they had to pay 150,000 in vouchers, right? So in fact, even though their order was much bigger than mine, their voucher was also much bigger than mine. So after they subtracted, I think it was 3 people, like 150,000 for the voucher. They subtracted that from the bill, and that brought it down to 57,000. Like, if there was no voucher system, obviously I would have seen the final total would have been an order for 3 people. It would have been like, whoa, that's way too much. You know, that's not right. But I never noticed because the voucher system kind of confused everything. And I didn't even try to get it straight in my head. It's like, I can't be bothered calculating, subtracting, how much for this, how much for that. So, so that was my experience at Lighthouse Padang. Beautiful views, though, absolutely. I don't think I would ever go back. I've seen the views, I've taken the pictures. If I was going to meet up with a friend or something, there are dozens and dozens of interesting places along the coast highway, like along the ocean there. So many places to go, you don't need to go back to the same one twice. And there was nothing so special about the food or the environment or the service that I would think, oh, I have to go back a second time. You do it once, you see the views, and I don't think I would go back there. But yeah, nice place, Lighthouse Padang. If someone were coming to Padang on a holiday and they wanted the Planet Doug tour, and I was going to take somebody around on a tour to show them the Padang and Bukit Tinggi area, I would include it on the tour. I would say, yeah, we got to go there at least once. You know, so if you're going to come to Padang and you want as a holiday and you want to experience everything, I would say at least one day, yeah, definitely drop by this place. It's worth it. It's a very unusual environment and spectacular views, really beautiful. So I would tell everyone, yeah, definitely go there. But be prepared for the voucher, the dreaded voucher. Yeah. Anyway, after that, I got back on my scooter. And I was going to keep the time lapse going because I really love these curvy, windy roads. And I wanted to keep the time lapse all the way back to my hostel, but I ran out of battery power. Yeah, I'm running into problems with GoPro batteries because I'm running 2 GoPros at the same time. I have 5 batteries, which is more than enough to get you through a day and 1 GoPro. But if you have 2 cameras running all the time, technically you only have 2.5 batteries per GoPro, and that doesn't get me through a day. So I'm constantly running out of battery power. Here in Padang, could I buy GoPro stuff? I don't know. Probably not. Well, probably. It's a big city. There have to be camera stores here, so I suppose I could, if I wanted to, pick up another battery. Anyway, that was the end of my Padang Lighthouse experience. Yeah, I was just saying I didn't complete the time lapse because the battery died almost as soon as I left from the restaurant. And since I'm talking about GoPros, I can ease into a quick technology update because there has been announcements online now about the new GoPro Hero 12. There was a big surge of excitement maybe a month ago when there was a leak saying that the new GoPro would have a 1-inch sensor, which would be kind of groundbreaking for GoPro. But now there are all these leaks coming out saying no, none of that is true, and they're saying these are the official new specs for the Hero 12. And I watched one of the videos this morning, and basically they were saying no, there's really nothing new at all in the Hero 12 according to the leaked specs. The battery is a little bit better, like you get an extra 9 minutes of recording time at 5.3K, and I think 13 minutes extra recording time if you're shooting at lower resolutions, which is fine. I'll take more battery life. But it doesn't mean the battery is any better. It's the exact same battery. They haven't released a new battery. They're just saying that the new Hero 12 will be more efficient in its power consumption, and it's going to eke a little bit more life out of the same battery, you know, the batteries that I'm using now, the Enduro. But who knows? I did notice there are some photographs have been posted of the new Hero 12, you know, leaked photos, so we don't know whether they're real or not. But I did notice that on the bottom, the photograph of the bottom, where they have the mounting fingers, there's now a tripod threaded hole. So there's a 1/4" 20 mount built into the GoPro. If this is true, it's like finally. It only took them 12 generations of GoPro to finally add a tripod mount, which to me is like baseline, you know, feature set. But of course GoPro did that on purpose. They want you to buy GoPro mounts. They don't want you to use your tripod from, you know, that you already own to mount your GoPro. They want you to buy a GoPro mount. So that's why I'm a positive that's why they didn't add a tripod threaded mount until now. Maybe they're not even doing it now. It could be that photo is fake or it's just not accurate. Who knows? But according to the new leaks, the second round of leaks, the Hero 12 is just going to be an incremental upgrade over the 11. Barely any upgrade at all. But I'm still holding out hope for some. I hope the tripod threaded mount is true. And I'm hoping that the front screen on the GoPro will be a touch screen, just like on the DJI Action, where you can actually change menu settings from the front. You don't always have to, you know, because in my case, I've got this GoPro mounted on the front of the scooter, and now I want to check the video. I can't do anything from the front. I have to park the scooter, get off the scooter, walk all the way around so I can get to the back of the GoPro, and then I can go into the menu and I can play back the video and check things. And I got to get all the way around and get back on the scooter. You can't operate it from the front. And it would be nice if you could. Not essential, but it would be nice. And DJI can do that. So it seems to me that GoPro would be planning to do that at some point in the future. They have to keep up with the competition. But there's no word yet whether that's going to be a new feature or not. And I could list a dozen other like user-friendly features I'd like to see on the camera. I don't care whether or not it ever has a 1-inch sensor. Don't need it, don't want it. But I could think of so many simple little things they could do to make the GoPro easier to use, like usability features. They don't seem to focus on that very much. They kind of let other companies do it, like Ulanzi will design an accessory that has all the usability features that GoPro just ignores. I think just leave it to other companies to take care of that stuff. But it would be nice if GoPro did it themselves from the beginning. But yeah, that's the GoPro Hero update. For my own technology life, it's, you know, more of the same. It's always the same. I was struggling with, you know, my phones because customs keeps banning them, blocking them. And I was thinking about using roaming here because I have a Malaysian SIM card. And I thought, I could just use it to roam for the next, whatever, 25 days that I have left on my visa here in Indonesia. And I was looking into that, but then I would have to transfer money from my eWallet to my Digi account. But in order to do that, I had to get into the system, and I couldn't get past the security feature. As I explained before, you have to know the answer to your security question, but there's a trick for the Touch and Go eWallet. They don't tell you what the security question is. So it's not like you just have to know the answer to the question. You have to know the question. And that makes me laugh internally so hard because there's the whole Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing. Anyone who knows that book series will know what I'm talking about instantly, because there was this whole thing where the planet Earth was designed as a computer to come up with the answer to the ultimate question of life and the universe. And this program, the planet Earth, all the species on it, has been running for billions of years only to come up with the answer to the ultimate meaning of life. And then this program finally wound down, it finished, and everybody was gathering like a huge society of these super intelligent, multi-dimensional beings were waiting to hear the answer from their supercomputer. And the computer said, the answer to the ultimate question of the meaning of life and the universe is 42. And everybody's like, 42? And then they says, well, okay, that's the answer, but what is the question? And then the computer went, that's a tough one. Let me get back to you. So it's like, well, it gave you the answer. The answer was the easy part. But what is the question? Nobody knew the question, so the answer was meaningless without the question. So all these security questions, what is your mother's maiden name? What was the name of your family pet when you were young? you know, I know the answers to all these questions, but I don't remember what the security question is. Like, which one did I choose? So you have to remember both the question and the answer. It's like, oh, for Pete's sake. And I kept trying, I kept guessing which one I had used. And then every time I got a message, it says, that's wrong. You have 3 more tries left. Nope, incorrect, you know. And the answers were all correct, but the question was wrong because I couldn't remember what question I chose. It's so ridiculous. But anyway, what I discovered is you can go into your Touch and Go eWallet. I'm already logged into my account, and in the menu, there's an option to change your security question. So I thought, oh, maybe I can just do that. And normally, to change your security question or your PIN, you have to know the old PIN or security question. But this system doesn't need that. So I just said, well, change the security question. I chose a new one, input the answer, and I was done. So you see what I mean? There's a problem with the logic there because it requires the security question answer in order to get into the settings. And that's a security measure to keep people out, but you can bypass it instantly just by choosing a different security question. So it turns out it's not even a security feature to begin with, because if it was a thief using my phone, they could just go, oh, change security question, and they could just change it to a new one, and they don't need to know the old one to input the new one. So you can just, it's like you can just bypass the security entirely. So the whole thing is completely useless. Anyway, my life of technology. I'm having an issue with, I just figured it out this morning, I'm having an issue with my Olympus camera because I'm recording these behind the scenes videos on my Olympus, which I love because it's such a solid camera to use. But I've been having trouble lately where I'm recording and then I want to stop recording and I push on the record button and then the camera dies. It loses power and the last video doesn't get saved. And this has happened a few times, and it's just like pull your hair out, frustrating. It's like, oh, come on. Because, you know, I'll record one of these segments that could be 20 minutes long, full of energy and excitement as I'm telling the story, and then I go save file, and the camera just shuts down and loses the file. And it's like, oh, for Pete's sake, all of that was lost. This is what GoPro does. How or why is my Olympus doing that? But it turns out, I figured out just this morning, because it happened this morning. The issue is, when I have the camera on a tripod, I push down on the record button on top, but in order to push down, I brace my hand with my thumb on the bottom. So I'm like pinching the camera, because if I just push down on the top, the camera on the tripod will just fall over. So I have to brace the camera, my thumb underneath the camera, and I push down on the record button, but I realize my thumb is pressing against the battery door on the bottom, and for some reason you jiggle that battery door and the battery connectors lose contact for just a second. So now I figured out, okay, when you hit the record button, be very careful. Don't touch the battery door. Hold the camera somewhere else and push. So I got that problem figured out. I also had a big problem with my GoPro glitching and freezing and corrupting files and corrupting memory cards. And I think I know what was causing that problem. The problem was I was using quick capture. And I love quick capture. It's such a great feature where you got it was always happening with this GoPro, the one on my chest harness, where the camera is turned off. Like, you don't leave it on all the time, and all you do is push the record button, and then the record button automatically turns the camera on and starts recording. And then when you hit the record button to stop recording, it stops recording, saves the file, and turns the camera off. And it's very convenient because you don't have to have the camera running all day long. You know, you just hit the record button. You have to wait. It takes a while for this to happen. It powers up, starts recording. You hit the button again, it powers down and stops recording. It's very convenient. And I figured out that every time it was glitching and freezing and corrupting files and memory cards, it's when I was using Quick Capture. And I did a test. And when I used Quick Capture, I lost the file. So now I just don't use Quick Capture anymore. I just turn on the GoPro and I hit record to start recording, and I hit record to stop recording. And ever since I started doing that, there's been no more freezing, no glitching. I haven't been losing any files, no corrupted SD cards. So pretty sure it was Quick Capture. That feature is malfunctioning on this old Hero 9. So I think I solved that problem as well. And on my keyboard, I've got this MacBook that I'm using. I've had a thing lately where keys are popping off, and I keep fixing it by taking other keys, like keys that I don't use, and I take the broken one and remove it, and I take another key and click it into place. And this morning, the letter E popped off. The last couple of days, I could feel it, that there's something, I could feel one key was not quite working properly, but I wasn't sure which one it was. And then just this morning, yeah, the letter E popped off. So now I'm going to have to find another key and switch it with the letter E. And then slowly but surely, all of my letter keys, you know, the 26 letters of the alphabet, all of them are going to be replaced with other keys. So my keyboard won't have any accurate letters. So like when you're looking at it, you know, the letter E will be the number 3 sort of thing. Like I have to keep switching them around. And so none of the letters are going to match what they actually do. And the only way you can type is by touch typing. You just have to know, okay, that's the letter E. But when I look at it, it's actually going to have the number 3 on it or something like that. That's kind of funny. But that made me think about a podcast that I watched recently from Radiolab. The podcast was called, what was it again? The Wooby Effect. The Wooby Effect. And it was all about the history of China adapting this keyboard, you know, what we call the QWERTY keyboard, K-W-E-R-T-Y, the QWERTY keyboard. How do you use the QWERTY keyboard to type in Chinese characters? Something that for a long time people thought was impossible, but over the decades, lots of different systems have been developed where you can use the English keyboard, you know, the QWERTY keyboard, to type in Chinese characters. And one of the first ones was called Wooby, created by this brilliant Chinese professor. And I guess he's very famous in China for inventing Wooby. And the podcast was all about the history of Wooby, this professor, how he developed the system, all the challenges involved. Because, of course, Chinese doesn't use a sound-based alphabet. It uses pictures, like they're pictographs in a way. So you can't have 26 letters to just create the sounds of Chinese. I think there's like 70,000 different Chinese characters, and clearly you can't put 70,000 keys on a keyboard. That's just too many. So each character can't have its own key, but then how do you develop a keyboard that allows you to quickly type Chinese characters? You know, it's a very challenging problem. So this whole podcast was about that. So you got all the, you know, people in China or other countries too, you know, that don't use the English alphabet. They're still using the QWERTY keyboard to type their language. But of course, just like my keyboard, this is kind of what I'm getting at, the irony, you know, we have the letter A, the letter B, C, D, E. Now I keep switching the keys. So when I type the letter A, it does, you know, it doesn't produce the letter A, it writes the number 8 because I've had to switch the keys, you know. And then of course all the, you know, the Chinese typing systems are the same. So I've got all the English letters there, but they're typing on them. And whenever they hit the letter E or F or G, it doesn't type that letter, it types part of a Chinese character. And then they have to combine all these images and then select one and say, okay, that one. So just thinking about how for Chinese people, the English keyboard doesn't match what they're typing. And now in my case, because the keys keep breaking, my keyboard doesn't match what I'm typing anymore. I have to memorize, by physical touch, which key produces which letter. And luckily, I'm a touch typist, so I don't ever look at the keyboard anyway. I just type without looking at it. So it doesn't matter what my keys look like. A very lucky thing. Yeah, I wonder how many of these keys are going to break eventually. But yeah, the letter E is a pretty important one. So I'll have to fix that today, and I have to select what to replace it with. I'll come up with something. I just stopped and started recording on my Olympus just now, and I used my new system instead of pressing, on the bottom of the camera. There's a little tiny thumb grip there, and you can put your thumb underneath the grip and press on the record button, and then you don't touch the battery door, and it worked perfectly. Because another problem I discovered, I got so confused about this, is that every time I did that and it shut the camera down, it also reset the date. The date and time went back to 0, but it doesn't tell you that it did that. So after I was finished recording and I was copying all the files, and I normally do it by date and time, it keeps all the files in order based on date and time. Suddenly none of that was working anymore. My files were all confused because some of the files had gone back to like 000, whatever that is in the Olympus system, like January 1st, 1899 or something. I mean, all the dates were screwed up because the clock kept resetting every time the battery disconnected. So yeah, endless technical adventures. One last thing, when I listened to that podcast about the Wooby effect on Radiolab, I learned something I didn't know, that the QWERTY keyboard, the way the letters are designed, for you to type the word typewriter, you use all the keys in the top row. And that's interesting because I always understood that they designed the QWERTY keyboard to be as efficient as possible, like taking all the letters that you use the most frequently in certain combinations were the easiest and fastest to reach. I thought the design of the keyboard was done for efficiency and speed, but these people in the podcast are saying that's not necessarily true. Like, nobody really knows. I guess it's a bit of a mystery how it was designed, but they're saying no, it's actually just a random arrangement, and what they really did was put the word typewriter all in the top row, so that when salesmen were going around, and the salesmen who are not touch typists, for them to demonstrate how amazing this device is, they made it as easy as possible for them to type the word typewriter, because that was, relates to the item that they're selling. So they put all the keys in the top row so they could type typewriter really quickly. And that's why it's designed the way it is, just so that you can type the word typewriter in all the letters on the top row. True or not true? I don't really know, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So I've been talking for a long time this morning, but I am going to talk a little bit longer because I'm just going to breeze through these real quickly, I hope. Just YouTube stories, because I watched a couple of videos yesterday and this morning. There was a new Itchy Boots video. I've been following her journey pretty closely in Africa, and in this video she's in Togo. And she was just riding her motorcycle from one town to another town. Instead of crossing Togo, because it's a very thin country, she could ride all the way across it in one day. She's going to go to the north a little bit and explore the interior and then cross over into the next country. And what jumps out at me about this video, of course, is the thumbnail and the main story, because the video is called "Military Men in Togo Take My Camera." And when you watch the video, the very first segment is like a teaser, right, for what's in the video. And it shows her on her motorcycle surrounded by these very rough looking soldiers, men with big guns. And then one of the soldiers quite roughly grabs her GoPro out of her hand and kind of tears it out of her hand, because Itchy Boots was like holding on to it, like, no, I don't want you to take my camera. And then so she was sort of holding it back a little bit, and then this man, he's a big, strong looking man, he just sort of like, and then walked away with her camera. So, you know, the title of the video, Military Men in Togo Take My Camera, and then across the thumbnail in big white letters it says, you know, confiscated. So I was very interested to see this sequence of events, because when I went cycling in Guinea and in Ethiopia, more in Guinea than in Ethiopia, but in both places I had constant encounters with the military, police, soldiers, government officials. It was just an endless series of roadblocks filled with soldiers trying to get money out of me, money out of other people. And when I was in Guinea, there was paranoia about cameras. I guess there was a lot of border trouble going on with Liberia and Sierra Leone. There were guerrilla groups fighting the governments in all these different countries, guerrilla groups forming in Guinea, wanting to overthrow the country. And whether it makes any sense or not, someone like me, a foreigner, wandering through the countryside, you know, with a camera taking pictures, everybody just accused me of being a spy. And this happened all the time. I mean, soldiers would accuse me of being a spy. You could argue they're just trying to get money out of me. You know, it's just a trick, you know, where they focus on the camera. But even in any place I was staying, in small villages or small towns, everywhere I went, if I went out walking around with my camera, which I normally did back in those days, this was way before video, you know, GoPros didn't exist. There were no video cameras that you could take traveling at that time. So I was just taking pictures with my camera. And then I'd go out into the village, and the local people gave me a real hard time. They would come running up to me and be very aggressive and hostile, pointing at the camera and saying, "You are a spy. What are you doing? You are, you know, enemy of our country. You cannot take pictures here." And it got so bad that I just stopped doing photography. I was too scared to take out my camera when I went outside. So I have very few pictures of Guinea. And I remember I have this one sequence of pictures. I remember this clearly, because I had a little bit of a telephoto lens at the time, and I was staying in this very cheap hotel in this small town, and there happened to be a window there that was aiming out towards the street, and I found the street traffic quite fascinating. You know, the types of cars and trucks and motorcycles going by, you know, sort of the classic African bush taxis, just piled with huge piles of gear, jammed with people, and they're going by on these roads. And then you see the women going by in their beautiful, colorful clothing, you know, going to market or they got the big piles of stuff on their head that they're carrying, and just so many interesting sights. But I was way too scared to take my camera outside, so I just set up my camera in the window. I did this for a whole afternoon. I had the telephoto lens on. I just snapped pictures of anybody going by on the street. I have all these, and I remember taking all those pictures because I didn't dare take my camera outside at all. You know, soldiers in particular would not be happy about my camera, and then local people as well, like the villagers. Yeah, they were very paranoid, very suspicious. And yet Itchy Boots seems to be sailing through West Africa with like no issues at all. But here it seems like something had finally happened in her case. So I was kind of curious. And as I was watching the video, getting up to the point where she encountered these soldiers, I found I was a little bit nervous. I was quite nervous on her behalf, because I remember everything that I went through in Guinea. And I was just wondering how serious this was going to be. And there's two ways of looking at it. If you're looking at this scene from the comfort of sitting here in my comfortable hostel room in friendly Indonesia, or you're watching this video from Germany or Switzerland or the United States or wherever you are, yeah, it looks really scary for her to be surrounded. It's a very unusual thing. It's not like you're ever going to be wandering around Canada and suddenly have 4 soldiers surrounding you, all of them heavily armed and acting very aggressive, and also men, which is always the most confusing thing in these situations. There's all these men in t-shirts, like normal clothing. They look like ordinary people from the village, and they're also in your face and talking to you and saying things you don't understand and ordering you to go here, give me that camera, what are you doing? And you don't even know who they are. It's like, well, who are you? Like, why are you in my face and being so hostile. You look like you're not in uniform, you have no official ID, so you don't know who to listen to. Anyway, it's a very confusing, threatening, sort of scary situation when you watch that from, you know, the comforts of your home, wherever you happen to be. So there's that way to look at it. But the other way to look at it is, you know, if you've had a lot of these sorts of experiences yourself, I was wondering whether her title and her thumbnail were true. And I suspected that they weren't. I suspected that they were a type of clickbait. And I find I'm more sensitive to the topic of clickbait than most people. It really bothers me for some reason. I think most other people are fine with it. You know, it's just a type of marketing, and it makes the situation or the experience just more dramatic and more enticing than it really is in real life. So anyway, I was curious about that. And then as you watch, you know, the video and see how the events unfold, it definitely, the soldiers were a bit rougher and less polite than they could have been, you know, about what they were trying to do. Especially the moment when the one soldier just pulls the camera out of Itchy Boots' hands. But in the end, what they were doing was checking the video to see what she was. They wanted to take the camera to look at the video, see what it was she was recording, and then when they were satisfied that it wasn't militarily sensitive, then they gave it back to her, and then she went on her way. So yes, the soldiers in Togo took her camera, that is true, but they only took it temporarily and then they gave it back. Plus, you know, the big word confiscated. No, they didn't really confiscate her camera. They just checked the video and gave it back to her. Had they confiscated it, they would have kept it. And then I was curious when I saw the, you know, the thumbnail, did that really happen? Because that would be a big deal to her. She would lose, you know, the camera. And it's pretty important to her to have two GoPros running at the same time. And she would lose all the video that was on the memory card at the time, you know, when they took the camera. And of course, the financial loss, she'd have to buy a new camera, that sort of thing. But I'm sure she would be more worried about the inconvenience of losing the camera and losing the video that was on the memory card, you know, whatever it was. But in the end, no, they didn't really confiscate her camera. They just took it temporarily to check it, and then they gave it back to her. And the whole scene is kind of funny, of course, because her motorcycle is like bristling with cameras and electronics. For a while, the soldiers seem to focus on her GPS, you know, the mapping GPS that she has, and they seem to want her to turn it off or give it to them or do something. And then she kept saying, well, it's not, you know, it's not a camera, you know, it's not recording anything. It's not a camera, it's, you know, GPS. And I think to an extent she was distracting them away from her other cameras, because she was very well aware that, well, they took the GoPro mounted on her chin mount on her helmet, but there was another GoPro, like a GoPro Mini, but clearly a camera, you know, mounted on her handlebars. There it was in plain view. And then, of course, there was the 360 camera on the other side of the handlebars, and the soldiers probably hadn't seen an Insta360 camera before, you know, but it is also a video camera. And ironically, or amusingly, the soldiers were so concerned about what is being recorded on video, and I'm sure they didn't want themselves to be recorded on video, certainly not behaving the way they were behaving. So, you know, they took away her GoPro and they figured they're safe, but of course the 360 camera was recording this whole, you know, sequence of events. It was recording at the same time. And I guess they weren't aware of it. They didn't know it was on, it was recording, and they didn't seem to even know or care that it was also a video camera. So that's kind of funny. Yeah, so yeah, the whole scene was really quite interesting to me. And I wanted Itchy Boots to talk about it later. I assumed this would have been emotionally, you know, bordering on traumatic for her. It was a kind of a scary situation to be in. And I thought as she rode away from the roadblock, she would talk about it a little bit and how she felt about it and the effect it had on her, but I don't think she ever brought it up. from that point, I think I watched the whole video. From there, she just rode to a hotel, checked in, and then went on a hike to a waterfall and ended the video. But I don't think she ever referred back to that sequence of events. And I kind of wanted her to talk about it a little bit. And of course, when you read through the comments on the video, I think the last time I checked, there were like between 2,000 and 3,000 comments. And I'm sure 90% of them will be about that interaction with the soldiers. And yeah, so most people would be fascinated with that sequence, you know, her going to another waterfall. You know, it's like we've all seen waterfalls before. You know, the key moment in this video is that encounter with soldiers. So I was sort of hoping she would talk about it, but yeah, she didn't. She never mentioned it again, as far as I can tell. So yeah, so that's the Itchy Boots video. What did she call it again? Oh yes, military men in Togo take my camera, confiscated. Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to let the clickbait go, because the accurate title is not nearly as fun. I mean, an accurate title would be, so, you know, military, well, not military men, even that sounds kind of vague. You know, soldiers check the video on my GoPro and then return it to me. You know, it's like, okay, well, that doesn't sound nearly as excited. And confiscated is a much more dramatic word than checked or borrowed or, you know, took temporarily. You know, an accurate description of this encounter wouldn't be nearly as exciting as, you know, the way she, the words that she chose. Kind of funny. All right, I have a whole ton of other things to talk about. Podcasts and TV shows and another YouTube channel that I started watching. It's kind of brand new to me in a way. I don't think I've done a deep dive on their channel before. It's called One Pack Wanderers, and it's an American couple, Tia and Chaveo. And I guess they've been traveling around the world and shooting YouTube videos for about 2 years now. And I started watching them, I think, because they popped up in my feed because they had a video from Malaysia. They recently were in Malaysia, and then now they're currently riding motorcycles around Vietnam. And so I'm kind of interested in that experience. So I've sort of been watching more of their videos, trying to see, you know, what cameras they're using, what mounting system they're using, just the gear in general, microphones, all that kind of stuff, and their editing style. They're very good. They're very good at what they do, and they both seem to be lovely, friendly sorts of people, very happy and optimistic sorts of people. But instead of talking about them today, I think I'm going to shut down now and get started with my own day. I have my own life to live over here. So that's it. Thank you for hanging out with me, giving me somebody to talk to through my camera, and I'll see you next time. See you in the next video.